Hey, how's everybody doing? So I'm the guy that gets to stand between you and cocktail hour. Isn't that outstanding? I'm hopeful that I could share some wisdom with you and that you'll walk out of here today with helping you maybe scale your customer success teams with a little bit less friction than what I went through in my career. So I got a lot of content to share with you, and we'll try to get through it as quickly as we can. So I've had a great career, super lucky to be in technology the whole time. And what I want to do today is share with you the time that I had at JobVite. It was a really, really great experience, and a ton of learnings went on during that time. So you might be wondering, what the hell does this have to do with scaling a customer success team? Well, when I was getting ready for the presentation today, for some reason, this was the first image that popped into my mind. And the reason that I think it did is because it was like the dark ages before customer success existed. Think about it. I mean, I was a VP of professional services back then, but there was no one executive in charge for the strategic success of the customer. And it was a scary time, I think, candidly, for customers. So that's how this slide actually got there. And then I thought to myself, you know what? That's how I'm going to organize my presentation. I'm going to talk about my journey through all the different historical parts of, or all the different periods of history. So let's go back a little bit in time. Think about Salesforce. When Salesforce launched in 1999, you might even remember their logo. Does anybody remember that logo? It was like a non-smoking sign, but what was in the middle of that instead of a cigarette? Software. They were all about no software. And so no software meant you were subscribing to something. You didn't buy it, you didn't license it. And essentially they started this subscription economy. And so that was step one. And so step two is, in 2006, Amazon launches Amazon Web Services. Well, that made what Salesforce was doing, who had all this capital, right? That made that any developer could come along and do the same thing that Salesforce was doing. And so Web 2.0 was born. And Web 2.0 is a new type of applications. You guys are all doing it today. But what was different about it is that it wasn't just a web page. It wasn't a brochure website or even an e-commerce site necessarily. It was doing much more mission-critical type work. And it was at this time that, in my opinion, customer success roles really came to be. And I've been listening to the keynotes today, and everybody agrees that customer success is a mindset. But I like to think of the definition of customer success as the way to scale the ability to take care of customers, right? Because we can't just throw endless amounts of money just to make somebody happy. So instead of just making them happy, the reason that we're trying to make them happy is so that they'll generate more revenue for us. So that's, to me, what customer success is all about. It's that scaling in order to generate more revenue. So let's have some fun. Like I said, I'm the guy between you and cocktails, so therefore let's all stand up. It won't hurt, I promise. Come on, help me out here. Everybody stand up. And here's what I want to do. Number one, take a good look around you because you're going to see the room change. I have magical things on your wrist you don't even know about. No, that's a different concert. So if you've been in a customer success role for 1 year or less, go ahead and sit down. Now, the people that just sat down, I want you to look around at the people who are going to stand up because you can probably already guess where I'm going to go with all this. If you've been in a customer success role for 3 years or less, go ahead and sit down. You can see the room thinning out a bit, right? So if you're sitting down right now, you might want to go tug on that person's coat or name badge or something like that, because they've learned a lot. They could be up here doing the same presentation that I'm doing. But let's go one more and see what's left. If you've been in the role for 5 years, more than 5 years, all right. So like I said, these guys could do what I'm doing. I know they've seen this movie before, but let's give these guys a big hand. So after the Dark Ages, if you remember your Western civilization class, came the Age of Enlightenment, or the Renaissance. And when I got the job at Jobvite, it was 2010. I was in the seat as the new customer success leader, had a very, very small team. And so this image also popped into my mind because I thought to myself, I knew what I wanted to do, where I wanted to go. I had a vision for what I wanted the strategic goals of customer success to be at Jobvite, but I didn't have a Waze app that was going to tell me everything that was going to happen along the journey. So it was kind of a crude experience in a lot of ways, but it really does represent what happened. And it's also, I think, relevant because it talks about the Renaissance is also about the Age of Enlightenment. And I myself was trying to get enlightened. I mean, it was, CS is really pretty new at that. In fact, it cracks me up when I look at job listings for somebody to head up a customer success team, and they're saying somebody with 15 years of experience leading a customer success team. Well, good luck finding that unicorn. That doesn't exist. So the first thing I had to do was figure out what the customer journey was, and my job was to align that not just for the sake of figuring out the journey, but to align it with the strategic goals of the company, because otherwise I'm swimming against the current and I'm not in line with what the rest of the organization is trying to do. The other thing, like I talked about, is I had to define my strategy. So Jobvite had 4 people on the customer success, 4.5 technically. We had one person who was working part-time who happens to be here today. And so there were 4.5 people on the team. And so the CEO said to me, "Hey, Dave, I want you to do an all hands to the company and put your vision out there to say, what are you going to do with this thing that's now all yours?" And so I think that was a super important part of what I did. And the other part was, and that I would recommend to you, any of the leaders in the audience, is to communicate that vision often. And it's okay to change your vision, but it's not okay to not communicate it to the company so they know what's going on. And then the next thing I clearly had to do was build the team. And so, again, started off with a team of 4.5. I grew that team 10 times in the period over 4 years that I was in that role. So here are some of the things that I learned. So it was a really tough time when I got into that seat. But much like during the Renaissance, where people got in rooms and talked about big ideas, my thing was I had to figure out the business first. I had to understand Jobvite's customer base. And so I've heard other keynote speakers today talk about segmenting the customer. Super, super important. So my thing, just, I don't know, instinctively I knew I had to know who the top 10 customers were from Jobvite from a revenue point of view. And I made sure one of the first things I did was go out and create relationship with those customers, because they're going to tell me something that I don't know. And that's going to be the fastest way that I go figure that out. The next piece of advice that I would give you is that establish your metrics early. And don't be too anal about if you have the metrics right. It's more about getting into the habit of doing metrics, of having metrics and measuring yourself, in figuring out where you're going to improve. And I got to tell you, I talked with so many CS leaders at the time, and I was relieved to know I wasn't alone. I wasn't the only guy who was like, God, I feel kind of lost. We really were all trying to figure out what are the truths, what are the things that I call them natural laws, what are the things that you cannot dispute that are absolutely true about our business. And so the other piece of advice I would give you is don't just look at support or don't just look at implementation, but have metrics for that entire customer journey so that you can start measuring it. And I would recommend the fewer metrics that you have in the beginning, the better. I have to say, I didn't do that. I used to spend a lot of time every week updating that dashboard, but I felt like I needed to do that so I could get comfortable on what was important and what was not important. So after the first year, not after the first year, this was in 2013, we had this wild idea of let's apply for a Stevie Award. We've done lots of really, really good work, and maybe we'll win some awards. And so as you can see from these pictures, I was a little excited when we won. And we didn't win just one award, we actually won 3 awards. And I'd love to see a show of hands. How many people are familiar with what the Stevie Awards are? So not very many, probably, I don't know, 10, 20% of the audience. I got to tell you what this was like. First of all, I go to Las Vegas in a huge room, probably easily 2 to maybe even 4 times as large as this room. There's 400 people sitting in the room from around the world just like me. And they don't know which awards they've won yet or not. The only one that was announced in advance was the People's Choice Award. So I have to say that picture on the left where I'm winning that award, that's kind of staged. I mean, it did happen in real time, but that one we knew we were winning. But the one I didn't know we were winning were the other 2 that year. So let's talk about why we won those awards. I want to share what we did to win them. So I want to talk about friction. So I was really lucky prior to that Stevie Award submission to read an article about friction in business. And after reading that article, it made me think about what was the customer experience that I was defining for our customers to do business with us, essentially. And so one of the reasons we ended up winning that award, we found out, is because we created a frictionless support. So in other words, instead of saying to our customer, hey, you have to go to a portal to file a ticket so that we can help you, we got rid of that. I mean, we didn't get rid of it, but we added to it. And we basically said, well, what are all the possible channels somebody could go to that needs help? Maybe they want to call us on the phone. On the other hand, maybe they're too busy and they don't want to call us on the phone and they'd rather just open up an email and fire it off to us. My point is that we got rid of the friction and we opened those channels up. And I got to tell you, that was scary. Because you think about, oh my God, if everybody can support me now in any way they want to, maybe we're going to get killed. We didn't really get killed, but it was definitely a leap of faith. The next thing we did was create a real-time system status page. I heard somebody earlier today talk about, God forbid when you have that P1 or P0 situation, it's going to happen. It's part of your organization growing up. But how you react to it and how you treat your customers and the level of transparency that you're willing to share with your customers is going to define a lot about who you are as a company, the culture you have at your company, and the accountability that you have for what you're going to do to fix it. I also went to the board that year. I wanted to talk about the cost of doing these as well, because let's all face it, I mean, this was kind of a light bulb moment for me when I learned that the cost of my department went to cost of goods sold, and cost of goods sold goes against margin, and now all of a sudden you're expected to do a lot and reduce margins at the same time, right? So you can't spend infinite amounts of money. You got to be really, really smart. So we did take a leap of faith on offering toll-free phone support. We put a bet down on the table and said, we know we're going to grow. Let's do this one ahead of what it would cost instead of trying to stay within our target margins. Twitter, that was pretty easy. Email wasn't so hard. And the portal was something I did way earlier on. The system status page, it was easy, no cost. Tumblr. We purposely put it out on a different domain so that if our domain ever went down, that it would still be up and able to be accessed. And we promoted that so people knew to go to that particular page. It also gave us the ability on Twitter to be able to tweet to our customers to say, hey, if there is a problem, go to the system status page and we'll update everything there as well. But I went to the board. One of the hardest things I did was we had these higher revenue customers, and they started telling us that they wanted to be treated differently. And in order to treat them differently, I had to get funding for an account management team that's not a cheap team to build. And so, but the way we funded it was we said, if we do this, we predict that churn will go down. And we didn't have a churn problem. We've never had a churn problem at JobBite, I'm happy to report. In fact, when we were doing our Series C fundraising, our investor was like, there's no way that's your real retention number. It just doesn't exist. But it was our real retention number, and the creation of the account management team really kept that going. And this is probably one of the most important things we did, is we created a scorecard. And I did it back, I essentially did it manually. We took data from our back end. I'm embarrassed to say this, it's true though. I spent 8 hours a month crunching data from the back end so that I could put it down into a scorecard. And the important thing is that we shared that scorecard both internally and externally. So everybody in the company knew what was going on with customer health, and our customers themselves knew where they stood. And again, a little bit of risk there, because if you send that email out when they're close to renewal, they might just say, hey, I'll cancel. But that's our job in customer success. And we'll talk a little bit more about why that's so important in a little bit. All right, let's move on to the industrial age. So the industrial age is all about mass production, being able to do things at scale. Modern medicine happened to come up at that time. So how it related to me was really fighting to scale the team. We had built an award-winning team. We got validated by the Stevie Awards that we were doing the right thing. But here's what we did next. Number one, I have to confess, I never felt like I had enough resources, no matter what. I think Dan could have doubled my resources, and I would have told you I didn't have enough resources. It's just, I think, part of how we all feel being on the front lines running customer success. But the other part of it is really understanding the cost of your organization and managing within that. And that's a balancing act that you got to do. But the third thing that we really strived really hard to do was to continuously improve our offering. We weren't happy. We would never be happy. And I imagine you guys all pretty much feel the same way. You always want to be continuously improving. So we really started focusing better on the metrics that matter. And so these are just some of them. I think the point I want to make here to you is the one lesson that I learned the hard way is whenever you're doing metrics in a growing organization, you need to always not just report the nominal number, but you need to relate it back to the percentage of customers that applies, right? Because if last month you had 1,000 customers and 6 months later you have 1,500 customers, people could either be like celebrating, going, yay, look how great we are, or they could be freaking out if they start seeing the number of customers canceling based on just the pure number itself, right? So it's a double-edged sword, but always whenever you're doing metrics, this is another lesson I learned, is make sure you're doing it as a percentage of your customers so that you can compare equally one period versus the other. So we won another Stevie Award the next year, not one of them. We actually won 3 of them. And here's where I get to embarrass Jennifer. Jennifer, if you'd stand up. So this is Jennifer Frey. She won the Gold Stevie for Customer Service Manager of the Year, if you'd give her a big hand. So remember how I talked about you got to hire really, really good people? Well, yes, it takes a team to win these awards. It's certainly not me doing it. It certainly wasn't just Jennifer doing it. But it was adding someone like Jennifer to my team that helped me do things and helped continue to scale the organization. And so we did things like moving our support hours to 24/5. We implemented real-time chat. Just curious, how many people have real-time chat in their app, in their support? So, I don't know, maybe half of the room? It's the highest support channel you will ever find, and here's why. It's real-time to the customer. They don't have to wait at all. But for you, as the CS leader, it's scalable because most likely you can have more than one chat session at one time, but you really can't answer more than one email case at a time. You can't have more than one support phone call at a time. So super high customer satisfaction on real-time chat, also scalability. And then one of the things that I think Jennifer did that was brilliant is she put in what we call the transactional customer satisfaction survey. So after every support case got closed, we would send out a survey automatically to the customer and asking for the core competencies of how that agent did in terms of servicing their request. Did they know what they were talking about? Was it handled in a timely manner? Did they know the product? I think there's 5 of them. go corner Jennifer, buy her a drink, and she'll tell you all the secret sauce. Jennifer, I can help you get home if you need to after all those drinks. And then what we ended up with was a big improvement in customer stat and net promoter. And it wasn't like we were in the toilet or anything. I'm talking about just net percentage points, and I'm going to share some of those metrics with you in just a second. So after the industrial age, I'm getting close. You're getting closer to having drinks, just a little bit more. Hang in there with me. Is the age of information, the information age, and having that data. And one of the things I learned here in this part of my career, and it wasn't just at JobVite, but when I was up in Canada, I worked with this general manager, and one of the things she taught me is fight your fights with data. Don't go in there saying, I think this would make people happier, or we should do it because it's the right thing to do. But have data available, and I think given where we are with the modern tools available today, like Tatango, we have the ability to have that data. And I heard, I think it was Catherine earlier today, she was saying, we have mountains of data. We have so much data we can't even get to all the data. But at least start using that data. Find a way to use the data to tell or back up what it is you're trying to do. Knowing where to put your CSM resource when. So if you remember on the earlier slide, I talked about the scorecard, green, yellow, red, right? So it's a no-brainer that if you have a red customer, go put a CSM on it and make sure that they at least get to a yellow, and if they're yellow, get them to green. But this one is this next point I think is the one that makes the most amount of sense, is your sales team. I've run a sales team as well in my past, $150 million sales team. The only thing a sales team has is its time, right? And so as a salesperson, the thing that you need to figure out is, who do I call today? Where is the best place for me to invest my time? And it's not going to be to call a red customer who's up for renewal. That's not the job of sales. The job of sales is to go call a green customer and find out how we're going to get more money out of that green customer because they're happy already. But if you didn't have the scorecard originally to know who was green, yellow, red, I would submit to you that your sales team is going to be floundering a little bit. So the scorecard, again, sharing it internally and externally was a huge pivot for us. And then the other thing is at this stage of where we were, and it's not that it ran perfect every day, was that we had by this time developed a playbook for every part of the customer journey. And I think when you get to that level of maturity, you start to feel like things are moving a lot. It's never easy, but with a lot less friction. So we won a third Stevie Award. 3 years in a row, we had a three-peat. And how did we win it? Well, we had continued improvement and focus on customer satisfaction. We implemented WalkMe. They have a booth out here. If you haven't seen that, I would highly, highly suggest that you go take a look at that solution. It's incredible. We call it interactive help at JobVite. And I have some stats, and I apologize that I have to read them, but I think you'll be really interested in them. And then the other thing we did was an investment in positive culture. So let me read you some of the stats of what happened and why we won. So our customer satisfaction went up 6 percentage points. And remember, again, I promise you they were not in the toilet to start with. So these are just like incredible raises in overall performance. So one of the things that happens in a survey is when we get the survey results back, we score them on an A, B, C, D, F. And our A-rated surveys went up 13 points during this period. 50% of the surveys had perfect scores. That's where somebody was basically said, like, that person was nirvana to me. They knew what they were talking about. They solved it quickly. Just a great, great experience. As a result, our net promoter score went up 20 points. One of the things when we launched phone support, I said to our executive team, is I don't want to, we had a lot of pressure to do that, and I said, I don't want to trade one problem for another problem. And so hold times was a huge thing for me. I did not want to have people calling me saying, I called your support and I couldn't get through. And we never had that problem, but in this particular year, 95% of our calls were answered within 60 seconds, Average wait time was 23 seconds. Our CFO would probably argue that we had too many people up there. He would argue, hey, let's let them wait a little bit longer. Needless to say, John and I didn't see it the same way ever on that stuff, but he was doing his job, I was doing mine. Healthy conversation. And on WalkMe, the first month that we released it, had 15,000 views on features that we thought were important to our customers that helped us deliver value, which is what we're supposed to do in customer success. So to wrap up, just go through my 6 steps to what I call customer success bliss, knowing that we all deal with a lot of stuff every single day. So number 1, establish your vision, communicate it often, define the customer journey. Like you gotta do that so quickly, so important. Hire team members that only fit your culture. A big part of why we won the Stevie Award last year, or this past year, it was awarded in 2016, but it was for really what happened in 2015, was in the application we talked about the culture that exists in the customer success team and even broader at JobBite. And so really super important thing that you hire well. Track your metrics, not just cost, right? Cost, in other words, how much does it cost to activate a customer, but how many hours did it take, and what's the elapsed time as well? Because if you go back to some of the other metrics we talked about, time to value, that is like a ticking time bomb. The sooner you get somebody to value, the less likely they are to churn. The less likely they are to churn, the more successful your organization is going to be. Strive for continuous improvement. It's tough, heavy lifting. You got to keep doing it all the time. And number 6 is don't be afraid to invest. Love seeing the cameras. Thanks for that. Appreciate it. And my Twitter handle's there down on the left, @DLeahy. Apparently I didn't get the memo that you're supposed to spell out your whole name when you create a Twitter handle, so I thought shorter was better. What did I know? Anyway, bottom line, really appreciate your time. You guys can do this, and you've got great people here in the room to help you figure it out.